Over 12 million copies of Helldivers 2 have been sold, yet barely any of these people have tried the first game. And I was one of them until recently, because we've always heard things like the weapon balance was much better in Helldivers 1, teamwork was more important since it was a top-down and you share the screen, weapon customization and progression was much better, and everyone who's played the first game has a specific item they're waiting for to come back to number 2. For me, it's the Demolisher satchel charges. They're basically an expendable anti-tank grenade that you can throw and then click your reload button to detonate. You can take down a cyborg tank with one of these if it lands behind it, and throwing your whole load of these to wipe out large groups of warlords or even just some of the tankier mobs that spawn in this game is super satisfying. Another item I'm really hoping that comes back is the Rumbler. It's a handheld mortar that feels more like an anti-tank grenade launcher. It's very useful for taking out the biggest enemies, but again, can just be spammed at tanky mobs like the Brood Commanders. So I've been playing a lot of Helldivers 1 recently, and I've noticed some differences and similarities between the two games I wanted to lay out for you guys who haven't tried the first game. And this video is not going to cover every single difference ever between the two games because I only have 20 hours in the first game. I legit just have not tried everything yet. So be sure to comment down below if you want me to make a part 2 later down the line. We're going to be covering a few things like some of the primary weapons, some cool items I'd like to see return, and then some other things like teamwork. Because everyone says the first game is more teamwork focused because you share a screen. And that's definitely true, but I don't think that's the only system that's different between the two games that makes them so teamwork focused. So let's go ahead and dive straight into Helldivers 1. Now before we continue, I need your guys' help by letting me tell you about today's sponsor. A game you've likely heard of is now bringing Norse mythology and characters that most people love, like Loki, Thor, Freya, and Odin himself. And now is your chance to play as them. Raid is running one of its biggest events to date, the Asgard Divide. It runs from August 21st until November 22nd, with players being able to collect 4 champions based off of Norse mythology. But as part of the Asgard Divide limited time offer event, you can face off against the almighty Odin Feyfather himself, and you can actually earn Loki the Deceiver for free by logging into Raid for 7 days between now and October 23rd. You can then log in for an additional 7 days to earn even more rewards, and access a second phase of rewards once the 14 days of login bonuses have been earned. One thing I think is really awesome about Raid is they have over 800 champions that allow you to strategize and play the game in many different ways, and they don't focus on balance as much as they focus on having fun. So if you haven't started playing yet, then what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description or scan my QR code to get insane bonuses available only via these links. You'll get a huge starter pack with an epic champion annex, and you'll get another starter pack after reaching level 15 that includes an epic feign. These 2 champions are available after downloading via my custom link or the QR code, and you won't get these packages any other way. And once you get into game, be sure to join the Thick Boys Guild, and I'll see you guys in game. So the first thing everyone will want me to talk about is primary weapons. And the main thing I'll say about primary weapons in the first game is they are very good for taking out most of the mobs. Every primary weapon, if it doesn't one-shot the mob because it's not a single target weapon, it will kill them very, very fast. Like the Tonto is a laser SMG that is very similar to a scythe, but it will pretty much kill all of the smaller mobs in seconds. With that being said though, on the harder difficulties, there are tankier mobs that show up that are more common than the weaker ones, like Brood Commanders, for example. And this kind of mob is not easily dealt with by most primary weapons. There's also Legionnaires on the Cyborg side, which they have heavy shields from the front. Pretty much you and a teammate want to kind of pincer them from multiple different sides, and that way you can take them out a lot easier. However, even when it comes to these spongier mobs, there are primary weapons like the Railgun that will at least stun them so that your teammates can then focus fire them from there. And the Railgun also stuns heavy enemies like Chargers. That way one of your teammates, or yourself for that matter, can pull out an anti-tank to deal with him really easily as well. And yes, the Stalwart wasn't the only primary weapon in Helldivers 1. The Railgun was also a primary weapon in this game, and even though it doesn't deal any damage to Chargers, it can stun them, which is insane utility. But there's also weapons like the original Breaker and another assault rifle called the Justice, which both have piercing rounds, killing all the small enemies really fast, but when it comes to those spongier mobs like Brood Commanders, you can at least deal chip damage throughout all of them. So even if one person can't take out brood commanders really fast, multiple teammates firing with piercing rounds through a lot of them will allow you to deal with them. Now, for what it's worth, I don't think that every weapon in the first game is as viable as people kind of make it sound like. And on higher difficulties, the game definitely spams a ton of tanks at you. But the primary weapons do feel really good at killing the enemies they're made for. And if anything, I'd honestly just think the weapons that have limited range, like the Tonto I mentioned earlier, are some of the worst guns in the first game, mainly because the Tonto has limited range. And a lot of times you want to shoot enemies from further away to stop them from spawning breaches. But for what it's worth, I really do like the Tonto, and I brought it with me to a lot of the higher difficulty bug matches. When enemies did get inside my range, it did finish them off rather quickly. And because it's a laser SMG, it had infinite ammo. Oftentimes I would bring the Tonto and an EAT, and that way I didn't have to worry about resupplies at all. And while we're on the topic of ammo, as I'm making this video comparing, the two games, someone in the main Discord named Bellegrim just happened to be doing it as well. He listed out how much ammo and spare magazines each primary weapon had in the first game. So thanks, Bellegrim. Effectively, you have tons more ammo in the first game, some of the weapons being able to hold a total of 12 spare magazines, and there's just flat out less enemies in the first game. Anyways, when I first started playing, one of the items that instantly became my favorite is the Helldivers 1 jump pack. There might not be any mountains to climb in this game, but this jump pack has 0 cooldown on the jump. You can just freaking spam it. It takes you super far and allows you to dodge attacks that would otherwise kill you. It's based on a fuel mechanic that can run out, but it resupplies anytime you pick up ammo. And once upgraded, you actually call down 2 jump packs with 1 call-in. So only one person needs to call this in, and then 2 of you get to jump around back and forth forever across the map. And it was honestly a pivotal item in taking down the Hive Lord. Now, speaking of the Hive Lord, this is an enemy that we are pretty sure is coming back to Helldivers 2, given that his corpses are all over the maps. But the Hive Lord is a full-on raid boss fight that is very exciting, and it's very difficult, at least the first couple times we did it. All of his attacks are just able to flat out one-shot you. He spreads toxic around the field that slows you, but at the same time, he is predictable because he does shake the ground before he pops up. Now, unfortunately, we weren't able to defeat the Hive Lord, and that is mainly because every time we almost did, we actually disconnected at about 20% of his health bar when he started spamming impalers at us. So in my personal experience, at least, the disconnects are one similarity between both games. With that being said though, the Hive Lord is a really cool raid boss fight where you do have to sit there and deal with his different phases, which is pretty much dealing with the different enemies that he throws at you once his health bar goes down. Once you get to 30% of his health left, he starts spawning impalers, which makes it super difficult dodging all the tentacles that can also just knock you down. And most anti-tanks like the EAT can kill all the tanks or chargers or impalers for that matter in one shot, which is really awesome. But it's also nice that the Hive Lord exists because it is a true raid boss fight that actually just soaks up a ton of damage, and it's more so mechanics and teamwork based. And that's one thing I really want to talk about in this video is the difference in teamwork between the two games. And we'll just flat out say it, yes, it is a shared screen in Helldivers 1. If 2 people are trying to run in opposite directions, or if you get split up by the mobs, it becomes very awkward. The shared screen definitely makes you stick together and provide more teamwork to each other. Holding your position or retreating all at the same time is very important at the higher difficulties. But there's items in this game to help you do that, like napalm, static fields, and even mines that allow you to hold your position very well, or in the case of mines, it's really good to throw down while you're retreating, and any enemies that chase you just won't be able to. One big difference between napalm in this game is that enemies will not cross fire, and it acts very similarly to the static field. But the shared screen isn't the only team-based mechanic that exists in Helldivers 1 that didn't get ported over to the second game. And one thing I want to talk about in the second game that didn't exist in Helldivers 1 is stim packs. Now, listen up, guys. I am a stim addict as well. Just hear me out. In Helldivers 1, there were no stim packs. If you took damage and you didn't die, you would just slowly heal over time. but tons of attacks can straight up one-shot you in this game. And the ones that don't one-shot you just need to attack you a few times and they'll knock you down anyway. And the one mechanic that exists in the first game is that you actually go down kind of into a fight for your life state instead of dying. Now you can pick yourself up slowly, or a teammate can come pick you up a lot faster. And I honestly think a down system alone would promote more team play in Helldivers 2. And now I'd also like to bring up the reinforce system in Helldivers 1. There is no set limit to the amount of times you can die. You basically have unlimited lives. Helldivers 1 really reinforced the expendable grunts a lot further, because you guys could die as many times as you could call in the reinforce. And each player has their own reinforce stratagem on their own cooldown. Basically how it works is if you team wipe and no one throws it, that's how you lose. And this honestly creates a very fun gameplay loop where you really do feel like a glass cannon. Your primaries deal with the mobs very effectively, and your anti-tanks take out tanks in one shot as long as it's well placed and center of mass. But your enemies kill you very efficiently as well. And if you drop your support weapon and your team has trouble retrieving them, you can easily snowball deaths until you end up getting sent back to the lobby. And Helldivers 1 absolutely throws overwhelming odds at you to stack the deck against you, with loads of brood commanders, chargers, warlords, or even impaler tentacles flying your way. And even though Helldivers 1 has a shared screen, I really do think the combination of going down into fight for your life and your teammates picking you up, as well as the unlimited reinforces, really promotes team play a lot further. I've seen a lot of people comment about Helldivers 2 where in random matchmaking, you end up running off on your own because of how the spawns work, in that Helldivers 2 likes to spawn enemies usually towards one player, and then somebody who runs off on their own can kind of finish a mission across the map a lot easier by themselves. Because in Helldivers 2, there can only be one bug breach or one reinforcement at one point. And the bug breaches or the bot call-ins are a lot bigger in Helldivers 2. A ton more enemies come in from breaches and call-in. Whereas in Helldivers 1, there are specific enemies that can do call-ins, but at the same time, there's no limit onto how many call-ins they can do. And for what it's worth, when they do call-ins, there's a lot less enemies that spawn compared to the second game. Now, the first game is a lot smaller. It is a shared screen, and for Helldivers 1 in general, it does make more sense to have less enemies on your screen. But I do think that the reinforcement system for the enemies actually is a lot more thought out, where you can kind of stop the enemies from reinforcing if you kill them before they're able to call it in. And if you don't, it can be a lot more punishing, because a different patrol can walk up while you're fighting off a reinforcement and call in even more, to the point where you'll have to throw down some napalm and retreat, and then come back later to finish the objectives. Now, the other thing really worth talking about in the first game is the progression, which comes in the form of weapon customizations. Now, each weapon customization in this game has between 2 to 4 different customizations you can get. There's extended mags, extra damage, penetrating rounds, stun rounds, and for that matter, each stratagem also has customizations, including the base reinforce and resupplies. For stratagems, they pretty much just give cooldown or activation speed to most stratagems. For the damaging ones, you can get more damage or turn some of them into the anti-tank versions. For example, the Knight SMG in the first game, which I am actually looking forward to unlocking because it looks like a more powerful SMG. The first upgrade for this gives mini stun rounds, and the second upgrade makes it armor penetrating, so it deals more damage to medium armored enemies. And I'm curious how the Knight SMG stacks up for brood commanders. Maybe it can stun them and deal damage to them, and I just want to try it out. Now, the upgrade for the EAT lets you move it and shoot it, because the base version, you have to stand still while shooting it. And then the second upgrade gives it a laser sight, so you can hit those center of mass anti-tank shots and basically one-shot chargers with these. The Rumbler, which is the handheld mortar that I talked about earlier, has 2 upgrades, the first of which gives it a bigger magazine, and then the second upgrade turns it into toxic explosions, which slows enemies that are made of organic matter, and it ends up being one of the best support weapons against the bugs because they all use melee attacks, and if you can slow them, it's really strong. And it is also anti-tank, so you can use the Rumbler to just straight up kill chargers and impalers. And then there's the Rail Cannon Strike. This can be fully upgraded to allow you to throw one every 60 seconds. And since Helldivers 1 lets you pick repeat stratagems, some of my friends really enjoy just picking 3 rail cannon strikes to deal with all the heavy enemies and just use their railgun for mobbing. Now, even though Helldivers 2 definitely needs customization to add progression, especially some late game progression, I will say that Helldivers 1 has a massive amount of unlocks and upgrades, and it does feel a little bit tiring. I have 23 hours in this game, and I don't even think I've started to scratch the surface on the amount of upgrades and unlocks that this game has. I know all of us would really like to see customizations in Helldivers 2. We may only end up seeing it for primary weapons because the stratagems do have the ship module upgrades. I would like to see a lot of the weapon customizations be more for utility, so maybe stats like handling, fire rate, maybe even some extendo mags, or even some awesome stuff like thermal scopes would be really cool to add to Helldivers 2. But I would also like to see some stuff like stun rounds, piercing rounds, maybe even toxic rounds would be awesome to get back in this game, to be able to slow enemies and could provide some awesome utility and reason to use some of the more lackluster weapons in the arsenal. Now, with all that being said, as I've said, I only have 23 hours in Helldivers 1 so far. I still have a massive amount of upgrades and just flat out a bunch of stuff to try. So be sure to like this video and comment if you'd like me to play some more Helldivers 1 and make more videos about it. And be sure to click the link in the description to earn Loki the Deceiver in Raid Shadow Legends. You'll get awesome starter packs and download rewards if you use my custom link. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comment section down below if you'd like me to make some more. I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm out.